Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the major manufacturing part number HIT-42FB8 is what this is. This is a template that is used for helping you get a flush bolt installed onto a wood door. And that flush bolt in particular is the Glynn-Johnson FB61 or the Ives FB41. I don't know if there are any flush bolts that are still branded under Glynn-Johnson. There was a time when Ives and Glynn-Johnson were not sister companies, that's for sure. And there was a time that Ives did not make automatic flush. Well, there was definitely a time when Ives didn't make automatic flush bolts. I just don't know if that time was within the span of my 3-decade career. They certainly always had the 458 flush bolt. I just don't recall 30 years ago if they had automatics or not. I'm sure that they must have. This is a work of art from Major. All of their templates really are. It's really hard for me to come up with ways to improve their systems. The fellows over there that are engineering this stuff, they are not only people with actual field experience and years of it, but they're engineers, they're metal workers, they're tool and die guys, they know how to work lathes and CNC equipment. They're tool nerds is what they are as well. The one fellow over at Major said, yeah, if you're a tool nerd and you are out in the field trying to install hardware, you're going to develop ways to solve these problems, and if you have a mechanical background. In concept, in theory, this item is simple in the sense that it's pieces of aluminum that have been mechanically attached is just what this is. But my goodness, if you need to get a job done quickly, this is going to get you really close to it. So a visual tour, a dimensional tour of the item right now. So here's your visual tour. It's a nice type of gold anodized aluminum, weighs 5.15 pound. At least it does with its instructions and an Allen wrench and some screws. This would be the top of the door. This is the face of the door, or the stile. This is the top rail or bottom rail. This plate comes off for when you are doing the faceplate prep only. What are you going to use it for, basically, is the question. Well, you need to install those flush bolts. And doing flush bolt work, corner flush bolts like these are corner-style flush bolts. They go in the top or bottom corner of the door. They're easy compared to extension flush bolts. If you're doing extension flush bolts in a wood door, I encourage you to not try to do that in the field unless you've done it, or unless you've got the tools, or unless you're brave enough. Don't try it. It takes experience and ruining some doors to learn how to do it right. Lever extension flush bolts are really meant for metal doors, not for wood doors. The problem with corner-style wood door flush bolts is if you have a 9-foot door, you're certainly not reaching up to the top of the door to flip the lever to disengage the bolt or re-engage it. You're certainly going to be thinking about automatic flush bolts at that point. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Let's do an anatomy of these parts before we get any further. So you've got the template, and when it comes out of the box, it has everything attached to it. You don't use it just the way it comes out of the box, most likely. You're definitely going to want to read the instructions, but this faceplate here, this comes off. You're only going to use this when you are mortising the body of the flush bolt, not the plate, not the decorative finished plate, but just the deep mortise body itself. You've got the body and you've got the plate. This, when it's installed, does the body. You also have these shims that are here. You've got a 1/4 inch shim here, and then you've got an 1/8 of an inch shim here, and you've got them here as well. These are meant to allow you to center this appropriately when you are on a door that is 2 1/4, 2 inch, or 1 3/4 inch thick. The way it comes out of the box is probably not the way you need to use it because it's set for something like 2 1/2. You don't use both of these shims. We'll look at the instructions and we'll talk about what you do, but just be mindful. You've got the 1/8 inch shim here, you've got the 1/4 inch shim here, and you've got it back here as well. The initial question you might have is, well, how do I get this attached to the door? Well, you're going to have to clamp it to the door, and if I were to make a recommendation, I might have looked to make this portion longer at the top and bottom and then used a couple of biparting elbow clamps. I am failing in being able to give you an actual proper term for it, but just a pressure clamp that you could clip over on each side, top and bottom, that might work. but you're going to definitely need to clamp this to the door so that it doesn't move. But the factory, what these screws are, they include those screws with the idea that you're going to simply hold that into the door with 2 screws. I've never tried it with just 2 drywall screws, and I don't know that I would be really interested in trying for 2 reasons. You're using a plunge router. You're removing a lot of material. You could bump into that template as you're running the router a bit more forcefully than what a drywall screw would tolerate. Plus, you're going to have a couple of holes in your door. Well, I suppose the hole in the top and bottom of the door, no one's going to see it, not necessarily a big deal. But I don't know if I'd want to have a hole in the edge of the door that I'm going to just then have to figure out how to fill. Okay, so I don't know that that would be my first choice. But switching to the screen view, let's talk about exactly how you're going to use this tool. It'd be easier just to demonstrate by going through the installation instructions because it's so full of images, actually. Let's do that now. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Alright, let's talk about this template, where we're going to use it. First of all, let's look at the extended description. You've got a factory image of it here, the HIT-42FB8 router template for Glynn-Johnson and Ives automatic flush bolt. It's a router template for those bolts. This template attaches with screws on the door top and front. A C-clamp can also be used instead of a screw on the front. This tool will work on 1 3/4, 2 inch, or 2 1/4 inch thick doors. It does require a plunge router with a 5/8 OD template guide and 1/2 inch diameter bit. Take that as not an option. Take that as mandatory. If you don't have these 2 items, this is not going to work for you. You can do the prep, but it ain't going to fit. The hardware will not fit in the prep. We'll talk about why. Product brochure and installation instructions. Let's look at the images that I have of this item. First, there's the label, the template itself, side view, the opposite side, the top of the unit, the underside of the unit, installation instructions that are included, as well as the screws and the Allen wrench. They give you these 10 screws or so. That's what causes me to pause. You're only going to use 2 at a time. They're obviously thinking breakage with bugle head coarse thread drywall screws. It might be considered fine thread. Anyway, your mileage may vary. You can determine whether or not holding it in with screws, one here and one here, is what you really want to do. Okay, let's look at the product brochure. It's basically an overview, but it does give us some additional information that is going to be handy to look at initially. Alright, we have the 42FB8. That's what it's going to look like on the door. On a corner sample of the door, I should say. Let's look at the description of what Major says. Here's an accurate and fast way to install these flush bolts. The router guide uses a plunge type router and will turn a long job into one that's both quick and easy. And I would even add, it turns a job into a potentially hackmaster job with a chisel and a butterfly bit and a big mess to something that's going to look quite professional, factory done when you're completed. This is a 2-part guide. The main guide is to cut the faceplate on the door, top or bottom, and front. Attaching the second template will guide the router to cut the body mortise. Just square the corners with a chisel and the job is done. This template attaches with screws on the door top and front. The C-clamp can also be used. This tool is going to work on 1 3/4 to 2 1/4 inch thick doors, and again requires that 5/8 OD template guide and the 1/2 inch diameter bit. I had a customer install some mortise and then try to install some sauce hinges, and he said, boy, the sauce hinges don't work the right size. And he ordered from me only the template and not the guide or the router bit. He ordered the template and the hinges, actually, but not the tools. And I says, well, that's very unusual. I've used that sauce template in the past. Hey, what diameter bit do you have? Well, it says 1/2 inch, or whatever it is. It might be 3/8 with that template. I don't recall. And he had the right size, and I had him get a caliper, and he measured it and gave me the right size. And then when we went to confirm the template OD, indeed, he was using one that was not the right size. He was using one that was actually too large, which was netting him a smaller fit. than what it would tolerate. So he did have to get the right template guide, simply remortise, a quick and easy job, and they certainly fit in just like they ought to have. All right, let's look at the installation instructions. They're in the packaging. They're going to come with it. It's nice being able to look at it here online because it's a lot more portable than some paper. And one thing that's very nice about installation instructions from Major is they use really big font and really big photos, and that's nice. So router basics, eye and ear protection, obviously. I always wear gloves, or at least something thin, but I always wear lung protection as well. The eye and the ear, that's obvious. But what's not obvious is slapping on a dust mask, and a good one too. Don't underestimate the value of that. I believe the years I spent in a wood shop plagues me years later. Make sure a router template guide is installed in the base of your router. This stuff I'll let you read, not much for us to go through there. This is what you need to get started setting up your router. Whether it be the FB6 or the FB8, which is what we're talking about, you must have a router base installed. That's this black item. No big deal. You must have a 5/8 guide. The diameter of this guide, if you put a caliper on it, is 5/8. It has to be 5/8. That dimension, along with the diameter of the bit that's going through there, this would be a plunge router bit, 2-flute. This is a 2-flute carbide, 1/2 inch, 4-inch long router bit. You're going to need a plunge router bit. You're going to need a longer bit. Choose a router bit long enough to reach the bottom of the flush bolt mortise. The router must also have enough throw to reach, meaning you've got to have a plunge router, a router that you can change the depth by pulling a lever and pushing the unit up and down in relationship to its base. The standard router is not the way to go with this. So you can use this on those 3 different door thickness ranges we talked about. We'll discuss how. This is what it looks like. A screw here, a screw here. With this is what you're going to use to do the faceplate. I wouldn't do it in this order. I would remove the faceplate. I would do the body prep first. I like to work from deepest to shallowest, so in case I nick the edge of the door, I've not done the faceplate prep already. I can sometimes go over that. How you end up nicking the door is when you pull the tool out of the template before it's completely stopped turning. That's a fool's way to proceed because this template is extremely expensive. Once you nick the outside of this, you've not only potentially damaged your router bit, but you've permanently damaged a very expensive tool. Always just make it a rule that you never remove the tool while it's still turning. So, template for mortise cavity, remove it to route the faceplate. So what I would end up doing is and I understand why they do it in this fashion, because you're not going to be able to do the body at the top with the faceplate installed, so that's why they do it first. I would very likely prep the body on the stile first, pull that off, then I would do the body up here, and then I would do the faceplate. So it's going to be less convenient making those 3 steps if you do it this way. Actually, I don't think you're going to need to remove this. It would depend on how far deep you're plunging here. You might not need to remove that at all. I've not actually used this tool, but that would just be a matter of doing it and then seeing whether or not you've got to remove that once or twice. But I would do the body first. I would prep this, get the entire body prep done, then remove it and do the faceplate. Now, so we talked about the 1/8 inch shim and the 1/4 inch shim. When there are no shims, you're going to do a 2 1/4 inch thick door. So right out of the box, you're not going to do anything because both of those shims are stacked on each other. So if you're going to do an 1 3/4 thick door, 1/4 inch thick mounted on the inside will center the template on an 1 3/4 thick door. So you're going to use the 1/4 inch shim. You're obviously going to have to remove the 1/8 of an inch shim. Probably remove it, put it in your toolbox, and you'll have it there if ever doing a 2 inch thick door. If you're going to do something, it's this, and then it's this, and maybe 2 inch thick, but you won't use it as it comes right out of the box. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Flush bolt installation. The door must be removed from the jamb for a bottom bolt. The top, you could actually probably leave it hanging. I don't know that you'd really want to do your prep like that, though, with the door hanging in the opening. So they're obviously showing you how to attach The template, you accomplish this by using a drywall screw. The top hole left in the door will not be seen. The hole in the front of the door can be patched with a dab of putty. That may or may not be agreeable to you or your client or the owner. Or a finish screw can be installed and it will look like part of the installation. That's a no. They've got the plate removed, the body shim template removed, so they're obviously doing the body here. Adjust the depth of the router and route the faceplate cutout. After routing the door face, route the top of the door. So this is removed, so you can do the entire faceplate here, and then you're doing the body prep. Well, what would still end up being the faceplate up at the top. Actually, yeah, this makes perfect sense for me. Actually, I would do the body first. I would just swap these two steps. Do the body up top, and then remove that and do the entire faceplate. They're obviously showing doing the body. Don't try to do it in one pass. They say remove no more than 1/4 inch at a time. I find that's a lot of wood to remove with a router. It will take multiple passes to get down to the depth required for an Ives FB41. Let's see if we can come up quickly with a template here. Yeah, so Major has it right in the sense of when you do the faceplate, you're doing the entire faceplate. All of this. When you're doing the body with the template installed, that will achieve you just this prep here. And we can verify that because we can see that it's 1/8 of an inch on the bottom or top, and then it's 1/8 of an inch on the face. So you're going to have a router set to 1/8 of an inch, and you're just going to make that happen. Easy stuff. All right, back to the installation instructions. Square out the corners. A corner chisel is going to usually have one of these. It would be called a chisel, actually. This black part is governed by a spring and is all held captive in the body. And when you give it a little smack, it'll leave a squared out corner. A lot faster than using a chisel to do it, in my opinion. If you're going to do woodworking, get a corner chisel, for builder's hardware anyway. Obviously, pre-drilling and then attaching the flush bolt. Always pre-drill. You do not want to split the door. That's what it looks like when it's done, obviously. Nice clean installation. Looks a little deep up there. I would sure want to make that fit a little bit tighter. Okay, now the last thing here, almost the last thing, below this video, here is a link to the manufacturer's page. And from here you can pull up not only all of the major products we sell by means of this horizontal navigation here, you can also pull up a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to their full product catalog. I would absolutely suggest that you take a tour of the full product catalog. It is absolutely a very handy way to be able to understand exactly what it is that you're dealing with in the major line. The first half of the book or so is security hardware, locksmithing tools, things of that nature. If you're a locksmith or you integrate in the field, you will want to absolutely give this catalog a once through. If you're not familiar with major, you're going to feel like Christmas morning after you discover this catalog. It's fun. Something to look forward to. The back half of the catalog is full of templates. So if I were to search for the 42FB8, we can search the document. The purpose of that is it'll get you down into the area where any sister products will be related to what you're doing here. There's a 42FB6 that's going to be for your residential flush bolts, the Ives 262, and all the people that have copied that flush bolt over the years. There's a router bit here that they recommend. I would strongly consider using the recommended tooling from Major. What's interesting is the HIT-43FB8. You're going to use this with the HIT series, the HIT platform. The HIT-44, I believe, is what it is how you're going to do regular flush bolts. I'm sorry, it's the HIT-33, not the HIT-44. That'll require the HIT-33. Here it is. And it's got an adaptable faceplate there for you to use. You might want to investigate how that's attached to the door before you decide to purchase these. You know, the problem with this template is it's going to give you the faceplate. It's going to give you the ability to do the body. It's not going to give you the hard part, which is this drill extension for flush bolts. Being able to drill that 1/2 inch hole or 5/8 hole, I forget the diameter, down to the cavity, 10 inch long. That's the trick. That's why you get the big money. What I'm driving at here is you've got the edge of your door. You've got to drill that hole. Well, the problem is, you've got a stile here. This is the door veneer here. That stile can be a single piece of wood. It could actually be two pieces of wood that are laminated together. That's very common. And sometimes you're trying to drill that hole where you've got hardwood here and you've got mill option. You could have oak turned into a style that's been glued down to poplar, two different densities. So that drill bit, as you've got it laying on its side, and here you are, that bit sometimes wants to go out like that, sometimes it wants to go like that, sometimes it wants to go like that, like that. So it's a trick doing that sort of work, and that's why you should seriously consider avoiding lever extension flush bolts and wood doors. Obviously, it's a fire-rated door. You're not going to do any of this prep in the field. Let's wrap up this video on camera. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Alright, so I'm pretty partial when it comes to this series of templates and items from Major. There's generally one person at Major that I speak to. He stands apart from the rest of the industry because there are times that I have to call and say, what do you intend? How am I supposed to attach this to the door? A mounting tab. I need an explanation on it in terms of, I wasn't understanding what was being written in the instructions. And he says, yeah, when you do this and you do this, I'm like, thank you. So when you speak to them, you're speaking to people who have been in the field. You call other manufacturers, and they're data entry people sometimes. They don't understand how it works, how it's installed. And Major's not the only company that makes templates that understand the product. But if you're going to be in the locksmithing industry, you better be an expert, because locksmiths, they're out there trying to integrate. They're out there using your tools to make a living. Literally, their ability to make a living is dependent on the using of this, not the reselling. Who cares about reselling? I'm reselling it, so I don't, whether or not you get this to work or not, if it does what it's described to do and you have got a problem getting it to work, well, that's a different problem than you having to get it to work. It's a different problem for me, so I get off easy. But I would like to think we're like Major in the sense that I've spent years in a wood shop, years mortising everything under the sun, wood doors, metal doors, frames, every component. So I understand it, and while I have not used this, I would personally go about doing it a different way. The way that I would do it is not, is not the majority opinion. So be mindful of the fact that there's multiple ways to get to the solution. The way I would go about it is not necessarily the way I would recommend you go about it. And generally the people that are buying this material want to buy something, be done with the job, and then move on to something else. And they're not a door shop necessarily. This is actually for stock, so this is not an active order. But someone's going to buy this. You've got to get doors closed off and hung and done, because you're getting kicked off the job, in 3 days because school's reopening. This is where that stuff comes in. I don't mean kicked off the job. I mean the deadline is this date because school's reopened, that kind of stuff. Be mindful. It's not for fire doors. If you're doing this work in the field for fire doors, you proceed knowingly destroying the fire rating of that opening, so be mindful. It's not that it's technically not permitted, it's just not permitted. The standard NFPA 80s where you find that information. Any questions on the 42FB8, 42FB8, or any other Major product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.